afternoon, everybody. I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023. May I have the roll call, please?
Chair McGill.
Here.
Vice Chair Feck. Commissioner Aldana.
Present.
Commissioner Chang. Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
You.
Commissioner Anander-LaBerge.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. Any written public comment? I didn't see anything come in this month. No. All right. So that brings us to public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the commission. The total amount of time for public comment will be 15 minutes. There are no speaker slips, so no one in the room. Do we have anybody offline?
We do not.
Okay, great, thank you. We have Youth Council report on the agenda, but I believe that's being postponed till next month. Is that correct? Okay. Then with that, that takes us to the committee assignment reports. I'm going to start on my left this time. So with Commissioner Clark.
Hi, I attended the Street Tree Advisory Committee, a visit to all the trees on our agenda, and we will be discussing those trees later, so I don't need to elaborate right now.
Okay, thank you.
I was unable to attend Park this month.
Okay. Commissioner Chang.
I was not able to attend.
Yeah,
Hello, does it work? The light's on.
the light's on.
Test. I was not able to attend the meeting. Hello? But I was able to tour the golf course, and it was, we went through some of the capital projects that are being planned over the next few years.
Thank you. This will be a new twist. All right, Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
I was unable to attend the youth council meeting, but I'm happy to report they got a grant for coffee with a council member, which sounds exciting.
Good deal. Yeah, I really like their civic engagement and service. That's great. Commissioner Aldana.
I was not able to attend the Creeks Advisory Committee meeting, and the Neighborhood Advisory Council was canceled due to not having quorum.
Okay, thanks. And I was able to attend the park meeting last week. Usual review of financials and continued our discussion on umbrella groups. And I also attended the planting day at Arroyo Burro Open Area, where a enthusiastic team made short work of a lot of digging holes of wet clayey soil, and I discovered that I'm not as fit as I used to be after a couple hours of digging wet clayey soil.
I've done that too over there for winter plantings. It's tough.
It's tough, yeah. Okay, I think that's it for the assignment reports and commission and staff communications. Anything?
Nothing to report this month.
Okay, great, thank you. Ceremonial items.
None.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on to page 3. And that then takes us to the summary of council actions. Does anybody have any questions about the list? I have just one. It's just a curiosity question of what the professional service agreement, what the hazardous fuels mitigation project agreement is.
Chair McGill, I'm just looking for that one. There. Which one?
Number 5.
Oh, hazard mitigation. I apologize. I don't think of it by that name.
Maybe it's going to be, maybe I'm going to go, aha, when you say what it
However,
is.
hazardous fuels mitigation project. So Parks and Recreation has been working with the fire department to prepare and secure grant funds from the State Coastal Conservancy for the purpose of preparing bioresource studies for parks, open space parks in Santa Barbara, and then subsequently moving forward with hazardous fuels mitigation work to make them safer under high fire hazard conditions. So this first step in the process was to award a contract to Summit West, who will be doing the bioresources studies for the parks. Those will precede identifying the work program that we would be doing in each of those parks, likely next fall, this fall, 2023 fall, early winter.
Okay. So this is separate and distinct from the fire mitigation work that's going on in Douglas right now, or was going on, I'd say.
Chair
Weeks ago.
McGill, yes, it is. And that is, however, another example of how we're working with the fire department to address vegetation issues in a variety of our open space parks that also meet our resources mitigation and habitat enhancement objectives.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any additional questions? Okay, good, because I don't have my, yeah. So then that takes us to the minutes with the recommendation that the commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 25th. Anybody have any comments or a motion?
Actually, is this working? Can I take it back? I did have one question. I just didn't know where to talk about it on this agenda, but I do see that the Hilda Ray McIntyre Park is on the summary of council actions, so maybe this is the right time. I just wanted to state a concern I had. Would that be new business later, or?
I don't think it comes up, I mean, the only other place it would come up would be under the turf renovation.
Chair McGill and Commissioner Clark, we have caretaker residences in 3 of our parks. That may be what you're referencing.
Yeah, it is.
And so this was the renewal of the lease agreement with the different staff that are actually living in those caretaker residences, of which there is one at Hilda Ray Park.
So I had recently noticed on Nextdoor, someone had been complaining about the state of that particular park and wondering what that caretaker did. And there's a lot of misinformation on that post on Nextdoor, and a lot of, I saw a need for education, and I was about what is happening in the park. And I was wondering if in the future, our new marketing coordinator, when she sees things like that on Nextdoor, could invite people to come to public comment so they can express themselves, be heard, and maybe get some real education.
Commissioner McGill, Chair McGill, Commissioner Clark, we definitely follow what we see in the social media and do our best to do our outreach around that kind of thing. And I think that's the step that we would take, rather than asking them to come to a commission meeting to make public comment. But thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah,
Because that's certainly something I will look into and see if we've had the opportunity to follow up on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that is maybe a fit for all of the people that are living in the parks, is that they're good ambassadors for getting the proper information out. Yeah. All right, now to the minutes. Do we have a motion on the minutes?
I can make a motion to waive the reading of the minutes and approve them.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, now we get to test the voting system on something that should be pretty non-controversial. All right. So, all in favor of the minutes? Well, no, I guess you just do whatever you want, and then we lock it. All right. That was easy. Okay, and that takes us to the trees. Mr. Slack, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair McGill and Commissioners. The first Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is a request to remove a Tippewana tipu. It's a tipu tree commonly known. It's located at 611 West Victoria Street. This is a street tree planted in the public right-of-way. The applicant expressed interest in removing the tree primarily due to what we would call hardscape disruption, sidewalk, curb and gutter damage. If you were able to do a site visit, you probably noticed that the curb and gutter actually has just been replaced. There was a really old sandstone curb and gutter there prior to the recent work that took place in front of the property. And the tree had significantly damaged that to the point where it couldn't be salvaged. So the applicant took it upon himself to pull a permit from Public Works and replace the curb and gutter due to ponding issues and some other nuisance-related things associated with the tree roots. The sidewalk's also been replaced. We had a site visit a while back and kind of talked about the tree and sort of progressive steps forward, and we encouraged him to submit an application, kind of noting that we all are very familiar with what the tipu tree does in terms of its rooting system and its just mature potential. It's a very large tree and will grow to a large tree regardless of the size that it's in. And given such a large financial investment in the property, he was motivated to take a progressive step forward and proposed removing the tree and replacing it with 2 new street trees. So even though there's several tipu trees planted on this specific block of 600 West Victoria Street, the designated species is actually the Brazilian cedarwood, or also known as the cigar box. It's probably a much more appropriately sized tree for this specific area, so that would be the tree that would be put back in. The committee on site noted the damage. There was consensus about the mature size of the tree and that it was really only a matter of time that there would be continued need to repair the hardscape, the curb and gutter, and probably the sidewalk. And after review, made a recommendation to approve the removal as proposed on the application. So that would be the removal of the existing street tree and the planting of 2 new designated street trees in front of the property.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Slack? Okay, I have one. I guess I thought I read that this was denied previously, that there was an application that was denied previously. Did I misread that? Because I certainly don't remember it in my time. Maybe I misread it. That's one question, but yeah.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, I do believe, but it was many years ago. The applicant's here. I'm not sure if we want to get into that, but I think it was several years prior,
Okay, yeah, because,
roughly 10 years.
okay. And then I guess the other question I had was I looked at the tree basically immediately next door. Looks like fundamentally it's the same circumstance. I guess the question would be, why would this tree be subject to removal and replacement when the exact same thing is going on maybe 30, 40 feet down the walk?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, that's a great question. I think the real difference here is that, the urban forestry program doesn't have the capacity to go around and remove every tree that's causing problems. The applicant's taken it upon himself to submit an application. So in this instance, if the commission approved the Street Tree Advisory Committee's recommendation, all costs associated with the removal and the replanting would be at the applicant's expense. So I think anytime that we look at a street tree removal application and it makes it to the commission, it's a tree that if it was just purely up to staff's decision, we wouldn't remove it. It would be our intent to retain it, and at some point in time, it may be subject to removal for the, root pruning or other various reasons, but it wouldn't be something we would remove. So in the case of the tree that's nearby, we've had no active involvement with the property owner, and we really probably wouldn't address it until there's like comprehensive street repairs, and then we'd look at root pruning and different strategies of retention.
Okay, thank you.
Were you saying that you're afraid of setting precedent?
It's a partly it's setting precedent, and, because it's not common to approve removal of street trees, even because of line fouling, if that can be pruned. So I just, and if the tree's really going to get that big and cause that much of an issue, then the other one's going to cause that much of an issue as well. So it was really I wonder why.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, just to elaborate further, I think that the committee saw it as like a practical, progressive step forward, taking advantage of the ability to remove the tree now rather than let it get enormous and cause additional problems, and plant a tree that's designated that's going to be more compatible with the site.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, can I discuss right now, or are we still doing questions?
Well, let's do questions and then make sure we don't have any comment, just to stick to our process. Do we have any other questions? Okay, I would open it up for public comment. I do not have any speaker slips, so there's no one here. Is there anybody online?
There is not.
Okay, and with that, Commissioner Clark.
So I too was worried about precedent, but I've been to a lot of these meetings, and the tipu tree is not widely loved by staff because it does become giant and it does ruin things. In this case, to me, it seems like eventually it's going to have to get removed. Eventually, it's going to be too big for that parkway. So at this point, we could get to 2 trees that are going to stay. That's what I took away from it, because I was struggling with it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any comments, any further discussion, or a motion as appropriate?
I would make the motion to agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee. Yeah. Yes, please.
To remove the Chippewana Tippa at 611 West Valerio?
Yes, 611 West Valerio, correct.
I can second that.
Okay, and this is on the condition that the applicant plant the 2 Brazilian cedar woods? Is that your motion?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. And that's your second, okay. All right, unless there's any further discussion, we will go ahead and vote. Do we have everybody? All right, thank you very much. We're not using our request to speak button, but that's kind of, I'm good with it. We can only do one new thing at a time, obviously. All right, now we are at, we're at Vista de la Cumbre, are we? I'm going to clear the list, unless you really wanted to speak now.
I was just going to apologize for not using my button.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is a request to remove a evergreen ash tree at 326 Vista de la Cumbre. This is actually a street tree. It's close enough to the street in this specific instance in a neighborhood where there's no, what we would refer to as an improved public right-of-way, so there's no sidewalks, no parkways. So this does satisfy the municipal code definition as a street tree. Thereby, like, no findings are required to support its removal. The applicant listed a few different reasons on the application. Most of it was purely due to the nature of the roots of the tree. They expressed that the tree's roots had caused a lot of impacts to the front yard, and then there were claims that it was just damaging the property, cracking the foundation, as well as leading to water damage, kind of like water collection at the property as well. There wasn't any supplemental information that really illustrated those last 2 claims. We reviewed the tree on site. The committee noted it was in good health, reasonably maintained. The yard was full of roots. There was just an unbelievable amount of surface rooting. And again, there was no real evidence provided by the applicant that spoke to the property damage. So there really wasn't a lot of good rationale to support the removal from the applicant's perspective when you really looked at it, and that was consensus from the committee as well. What was really unique about the review of this tree is that the majority of the members see the evergreen ash as a problem tree for the urban forest. It has a propensity to self-germinate, and once you get familiar with the species, you can see it everywhere. It pops up. It's probably the most aggressive and prolific germinator of all trees that we have in the city of Santa Barbara. They were using the term like noxious weed. It's technically not classified as one, but it certainly is really good at growing, and it does its thing. Driving around the neighborhood, we were able to find like half a dozen just within a block upon leaving this site. Based purely upon the tree's negative impact, especially in natural areas as well as just throughout the city, the majority of the members actually supported the removal of the tree. The applicant expressed an interest in replacing 2 to 3 olive trees as replacement trees to offset the loss of the existing tree. And after review, the committee recommended to approve the removal on the condition that 3 new olive trees be planted in the front yard at 326 Vista de la Cumbre.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody, yeah, okay. Taking questions, I've got 2. I'm going to start with Commissioner Chang.
Sorry, I have to use this mic because I've been silenced on my own mic. But can you just elaborate on the sole dissenter who did not recommend that the commission approve the removal of the tree, and sort of what were their points?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Chang, the committee member that did not support the removal felt the tree was in great health, provided a lot of benefit to the neighborhood, and just simply didn't agree with the majority who supported the removal. Completely opposed to the idea of removing the tree due to its essentially weedy nature.
Got it. And so I guess, like, to follow up on that, can you clarify on noxious weed? Is that like a professional term, or, how does that work?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Chang, I'm unprepared to provide the definition of noxious. It's a term provided to just a group of plants that have a propensity for germinating naturally. Most of the time when we talk about those, they're non-native plants, and they have a way of just eventually overrunning native plant communities. So, for example, the work at Douglas Family Preserve was to remove a species of acacia that is really good at spreading its seed and taking over land areas, and this tree is also one of them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Clark.
But you did say that it's not classified as a noxious weed, correct, technically?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Clark, that's correct, but I don't think that really impacts the plant's ability to spread its seed prolifically. That is a fact, and it's widely acknowledged.
So you're saying it has impact on our natural areas, it outcompetes native species?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Clark, that's correct, yes.
And who was the dissenter? Could you remind me? Was it Maury?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Clark, yes, it was Member Tremmen.
Okay. Thank you. And Commissioner Aldana.
Regarding surface rooting, I see that from time to time, and what's the cause for that?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Aldana, I think, root systems are very opportunistic, and they kind of take what they're given. So it could be that the site's heavily compacted. Some species have a natural tendency to have a shallower root system than other trees do. I think there's a misnomer about trees being deep-rooted. That's really, not necessarily the case. All root systems are fairly shallow, but with a large evergreen ash, it's pretty common to see a very large, robust root system kind of at or near the surface level.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. I have a semi-question, but it's more of a comment, so I will hold it. And I guess, yeah, we don't have any speaker slips, so I'm going to open up for public. We don't have any speaker slips. Do we have anybody out there?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'll kick off with comments and sort of semi-question in opening it up. I'm going to go back to the noxious weed discussion. And, you know, in the time we've been looking at, and this concerns me because in the time we've been looking at trees, we have certainly looked at applications in the past where the request has been for, one of the reasons given for removal request was that it's a non-native invasive prolific species. And I do not recall us ever approving a removal on that basis. I mean, I may be wrong, but I don't recall that. The tree looked great. I didn't see any indications of damage around the property. And I'm just concerned. I mean, if we end up approving this very healthy tree removal, what does that mean in terms of other quite happily established non-native trees in Santa Barbara?
And Chair McGill and Commissioners, it's a great question. I think, you know, all applications are unique, but
I know.
certainly decisions can be precedent-setting and weighted. And I think your question is valid. It would make, certainly in this specific instance, future evergreen ash removals with the same argument, it would be hard to not approve their removal if the commission approved the removal of this subject tree. I think that you can isolate this species, and it really is. The arguments are valid. It may not be that it's valid for removal, but they do seed readily, more so than a lot of other things do. So it's a very valid point that's made. But certainly, if that's the only rationale, that there is the chance of setting a precedent.
And I understand that it's not completely, nothing's black and white, or else you don't need a commission if everything's completely black and white. But that is a concern for me. Commissioner Chang.
Yeah, so I guess who otherwise is responsible for making decisions or who's responsible for discernment in this area just purely based on what may be aesthetic or closer to aesthetic criteria versus sort of our criteria?
We are. I am. I'm not sure I understand.
So basically, it seems like this recommendation is based on sort of aesthetic reasons more than anything else. And, you know, is there any other part of the, you know, city government that is responsible for making those decisions, or does it solely fall on our shoulders?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Chang, so by Muni Code definition, this is a street tree, so it's exclusively under the purview of the Parks and Recreation Department. And the argument to support removal is more biological than it is aesthetic. It's not so much that it's an unsightly tree or that the aesthetics are poor. It's that it has a tendency to outcompete other plant communities and just pop up everywhere throughout town in areas that are undesirable.
Yeah, that's how I am.
But that wasn't the applicant's reason. I think you're speaking of the fact that the applicant didn't like all the sprouts.
Right. And I don't know, the committee found no evidence of damage and such. So I was curious about the recommendation, right? The recommendation states that solely upon the perspective of, you know, it germinates a lot. Like, I don't, you know, is there a point where a tree is just so aggressive that someone else makes the decision to, hey, we need to start replacing these trees, or would that be us?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Chang, essentially that would be probably a staff determination. If we had a tree population that was so problematic, you know, we would potentially look at developing like a proactive removal replacement strategy. In terms of that, this species, it's not something that we have a lot of as far as street trees. You can, once you get comfortable like identifying this, you'll see them all over town of different sizes. Some people have huge ones in their front yard, huge ones in their backyard, and then you'll see them, growing out of cracks and concrete and everywhere else. But we don't have a ton of them, but we would be the people that would make the determination on if we were going to actually isolate a species and start proactively removing them.
Got it, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start with Commissioner Aldana and then Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
I'm just looking right here on the application. The applicant states that tree roots have created drainage issues in the yard. You said there was a lot of roots in the yard. What's the percentage of roots? Just approximately.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Aldana, I'm not sure I could really say that. It was a pretty significant amount of surface rooting, but I think when we look at property damage and water damage and those things, it's important that the applicant be able to show that in some way, and in this case they didn't. So it would be either, in that instance, it would be recommended for denial, or they would recommend that the applicant return with more evidence that actually spoke to those reasons. But there were a lot of surface rooting in the yard.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
Did you forgive my ignorance, but what's the danger of a tree being germinating woods back in old 50s, run strawberry and take a water?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Can you repeat it, please?
What's the,
The danger of a tree of a population would be like in a 50s run strawberry and start killing everything inside. Lessened woods creates problem with the ozone layer. What's the danger to you and me as citizens?
what's the danger of the tree overpopulating like a monster in a 1950s movie and overtaking the city and becoming a danger to our citizens? Did I get that, Jacob?
You got that.
What is the danger to you and
To us, yeah. What is the danger
Yeah.
to?
Why do we care?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Lesnar Buxton, I don't think it would get to that level. I think we're pretty safe. I think, again, the argument that the majority of the committee made was that they see this tree as a problem for both the urban and natural environment, and it was solely in relation to its ability to readily germinate. And the commission can see that as valid rationale and support it, or they can have concerns and certainly make a denial on the application.
Okay.
One final question, then I'll stop. So do you happen to know how many of these species are in our inventory?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Clark, I'm sorry, but I do not have that information readily available.
Thank you.
It's a very low number.
Okay. I'm going to be honest, I'm struggling with this one. I'm not ready. I will certainly entertain a motion.
I'm prepared to make a motion. If you disagreed with, I don't mind.
You make a motion and someone seconds it, we'll vote on it.
I would like to make a motion to deny the removal of the, is it evergreen ash at 326 Vista de la Cumbra.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion to deny. It's seconded. Do we have any further discussion? All right, in that case, we are prepared to vote.
So it's yes if you were to agree with the motion.
So it's yes to deny.
Yeah,
no
yes to
approve.
yes to keep the tree.
Yes to keep the tree. Yeah,
No to remove it.
yeah. So the recommendation is counter to the motion is counter to the recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we there? All right, so The motion passes, and this is a good opportunity for me to remind everyone that any action of the Parks and Recreation Commission, I'm going to skip a couple things, may be appealed to the City Council within 10 days pursuant to Section 13050 of the Municipal Code. So you have 10 days to appeal this to City Council. Okay, Deer Path.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is a request to remove 4 river red gum, 1 coast live oak, and 2 Canary Island pines. These are all trees located within the front setback of the property at 815 Deer Path Road. The applicant listed multiple reasons on the application for removal. Essentially, it was property damage related and just general safety concerns for the condition of the trees. The applicant recently inherited the family home, so he's not been living there, and submitted the application again for property damage and just general safety concerns of the trees. The committee reviewed the trees. There was general consensus that they were very large. They had been kind of allowed to grow wild for many, many years, probably decades. There was quite a bit of evidence in several of the trees for like limb failure. The coast live oak and the 2 Canary Island pines appeared to have naturally germinated. They're kind of growing at the base of the large eucalyptus tree, and then the 2 smaller river red gums that are down closest to the corner of Deer Path and Alston also appeared to probably germinate naturally from the 2 larger trees. There really was no significant property concerns noted in that corner. Comments from the committee was it was just very wild, very unmaintained, and would be very difficult to get back under control, manage those trees well. The eucalyptus that's closest to the house, I think everybody was in agreement that it was a pretty spectacular specimen, a huge tree. The applicant, again, with the property damage, expressed there was some cracking and things like that in the home. While we were looking at the tree, just from the exterior, you could actually see the property bowing. The vinyl siding had a gentle arc to it, and the windows also had a very gentle arc that was pretty easily to be seen from the pressure of the root system of the tree. And the tree, I think the root flare is essentially like coexisting with the property, so it couldn't be much closer. And the damage was pretty apparent there. And shifting back to the corner, all of those trees, there was some interest in trying to save them, but if you were to take some of them out, the damage, just the tree removal process usually isn't always the clean and nicest of processes if you do take trees out. And all of the trees growing in close proximity together really prohibited the retention of any of those trees, aside from the large Canary Island pine, which is not part of the application. And in addition to that, there's a coast live oak that's kind of closer to the property in that hedge area that's also likely to be preserved, in the event that the commission supports the recommendation of the committee. We were out on this site for a really long time talking about strategies and what made practical sense. And after really extensive discussion and review, the committee made a recommendation to approve all of the removals on the condition that 3 new trees be planted on the property, 2 of which would be planted within the front setback and the other would be a street tree. And the setback trees would need to reach a minimum height of maturity at 35 feet. And as part of the review, the committee made the recommendation the commission could identify the finding that the principles of good forest management would support the removals.
Okay, thank you. All right, I got that must have been from the last one. All right, so for questions, first up, only up, is Commissioner Chang.
So the recommendation is contingent on a replacement. The person who submitted the application noted that there's no plan to replace the tree. Is there like a verbal discussion that was had upon the review of the tree?
And Chair McGill and Commissioner Chang, thanks for bringing that up. The applicant was on site. He was present at the the office meeting and then also present at the site visit. And I did have a conversation with him about the potential condition in the event that the commission supported the recommendation. And he was comfortable with the idea of replacing the 2 setback trees and the new street tree as well.
Thank you.
Any, Commissioner Aldana?
So basically, he agrees with the committee's recommendation.
Chair McGill and Commissioner Aldana, that's correct.
Okay, so then I have a question, and that's really down to, we are talking about removing 4, 5, 6, 7 trees and replacing with 3. How did you arrive at that number versus a more, traditional 1-for-1 type replacement ratio?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, I think when you look at the lot, there's already a couple existing trees on the property. It's the current designated street tree is New Zealand Christmas tree, which we see pop up very often. It's not really the most appropriate species for that street, and we agreed as a group on site to revisit that designation. I anticipate that will be changed to something like Coast Live Oak, something a little bit more sort of native and suitable to the area, a tree that can achieve a pretty large size as well. And I think when you look at the existing trees and appropriately spaced replacement trees, any more than that would be kind of busy. It's already quite busy, and I think 3 trees placed well, could certainly fill in that lot over time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Clark?
I was just going to tell you from being on site and actually going to that jungle, there was all those trees in the space that maybe 1 or 2 should have been. I think that was part of the numbers game.
Yeah, that was a pretty crowded corner.
Yeah.
And then we have Director Zachary.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, as I recall from the discussion also with Mr. Slack, it appears that these trees were volunteers. So they were intentionally planted, number 1. Number 2, I was actually at the site today, and these trees did not fare well during the wind that we had yesterday. And since we will have more wind, it could change. And I think there's a consideration for the fact that there could be safety issues related to those trees.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, I think we do not have a speaker slip, so there's no one here to speak to this. Do we have anybody out there?
We do not.
Okay, great. With that, I will open it up for, I'll say, further discussion, because it's been a combination and/or motion as appropriate. Commissioner Aldana. Yeah. Is your mic on?
And I'll concur with the street tree committee that we approve the removals on the condition that the applicant replace with 3 trees on the lot, with 1 being a street tree, and the setback trees to be able to achieve 35 feet in height or more at maturity.
And you'll do that with the finding that the principles of good forest management will be best served?
That's correct.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. And so we have a motion, we have a second. Do we have any, that was you, do we have any further discussion? If not, I will send it to a vote. And we are there. All right, and that takes us to our last one on Calle Rosales.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the last street tree advisory committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a Chinese elm located within the front setback of the property at 3045 Calle Rosales. The applicant's requesting removal of the tree due to just a general decline in vigor. The tree's health has tapered off significantly over the last several years. It has a pathogen called Chinese elm canker. It's a type of anthracnose. It's quite visible if you look at the tree. It causes these large essentially like elliptical cankers. It kills the tree's vascular system annually, so it has that sort of target appearance. Over time, it can compromise branches. Anytime you have portions of the vascular system, especially of limbs, being killed for one reason or another, it really can significantly compromise just the integrity of the limb as well. The applicant expressed the desire to remove the tree that's not doing well and plant a new jacaranda that they've been nursing from. It's the progeny of the large jacaranda in their backyard. The committee looked at the tree, noted it was completely riddled with anthracnose, in pretty poor health. It's kind of hard to see right now because the elms are either dormant or partially dormant. The applicant was present at the meeting and also on site, and the street tree supervisor, Brett Volpe, had actually met her on site a month or two prior to that as well, looked at the tree and kind of encouraged the application given the general decline that was present throughout. After review, the committee made a recommendation to approve the removal on the condition the applicant plant the replacement jacaranda as proposed.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Slack? Commissioner Chang?
How does this disease develop, and sort of does it spread to other trees as well?
And Chair McGill, Commissioner Chang, it's a great question. There's all kinds of flavors of anthracnose. Usually they're not as visible and impactful as this one is with Chinese elms. And then there's specific Chinese elm cultivars that have a higher sensitivity to it. It's fungal, so it's like spore related, so it's essentially in the air. Things like rain can, splash the spores around and cause them to spread. We don't have a ton of it in Santa Barbara. There's quite a bit we have a pretty large Chinese elm population, and we're pretty fortunate that it's not rampant in most of them. But it is, again, it's fungal, so it's essentially like airborne.
Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark?
So when people take these trees down, when the tree companies take them down, do they do anything to try to prevent the spread of the canker?
Good question.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Clark, the simple answer is no. It's pretty prevalent. It's been around forever. I think the big thing is, it's a probably we would call it a secondary pathogen. So as long as the tree's in good health, you have a lower likelihood of seeing it. And it could be, I don't know the history of the tree. It could be that it was one of these cultivars that has a high susceptibility to it. I don't know. It's not, long term, it's detrimental because it does cause considerable stress, but the plant can live, the plant's had this for who knows how long. To have that much of it, it's had it for a really considerable amount of time. And there's nobody's taking any measures to control it.
Okay, thank you. With that, we do have one speaker, Francine Graves. Okay. Done, thank you. All right, so, and do we have anybody out there?
We do not.
Okay, thanks. Okay, with that, I will, it's time for discussion and/or a motion as appropriate. Commissioner Clark.
I'm prepared to make a motion to agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation to remove the Chinese elm at 3045 Cayo Rosales with the recommendation, or so the condition that she replaces the tree with the jacaranda she's got in her backyard.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And Commissioner Chang, was that a discussion or are you were going to do motion?
That was more of a discussion question.
Okay, go for it.
Do we know why now? What was the prompt for the application? Because they planted it 20 years ago. When did they notice the issues? Do we have any sense of that? Or?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Chang, I would invite the applicant up to maybe speak to that. I think, again, it goes purely back to just a general decline in the overall health of the tree. I think at a certain point, the canopy becomes sparse and you stop enjoying it as much as you probably did several years prior.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I was just curious.
You good with that answer? All right, so we have a motion and a second. If we don't have any further discussion.
Chair Miguel and Commissioners, if I could, real quick, too, I neglected to mention the finding to support the removal was the principles of good forest management.
Which-
So if you could amend the motion to
Happy to
include
amend
that.
the motion to include that finding.
Yeah. Yep, done. All right, thank you very much. All right, that takes out the trees. Thank you very much, Mr. Slack. And we're on to the director's report.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, just a few things to report to you. One of which I think we touched on at our last meeting, which relates to the conditions of our front country trails as a result of the January storm events. As we all know, we got a lot of rain, which was much needed. In some ways, we got a little too much rain, and because of our topography, our trails can often take a beating when it comes to a lot of rain. As a result, there was widespread damage to trails within the front country, as well as in some of our open space parks. Since that storm event, there's been a great rally among trail organizations and local agencies to begin restoring those trails and move forward with making them safe for people to be out on them. Many of them were closed. The National Forest has been closed and continues to be closed. There's backcountry issues, but in the front country, between the Montecito Trails Foundation, Sage Trail Alliance, Los Padres Forest Association, as well as the local agencies, and working with the Forest Service, work is underway at Jesusita Trail. Work's been underway and will continue, I believe, at Cold Spring and the Ridge Connector Trails. We also had one of our longtime tireless trail volunteers do a bunch of work on Rattlesnake Trail, which made it safe for people to use. And then hopefully moving forward, it won't rain so much over this next couple of days and it won't be all for naught, but we will be starting the trail work at Parma Park and then looking at and continuing to monitor the trails elsewhere throughout the community. And then the very, very much loved and now increasingly popular, which we're excited that it's happening, is the Rose Garden pruning event in January. Was a great success. This was the second year where we had over 100 volunteers come out and prune the roses. Last year, it was finally, we think it's safe enough to do it, even though it's the pandemic, and then folks came out again. So kudos to the park staff that really organized and planned for that event, but also our marketing efforts. So Aaron Blasey making sure that we're marketing that event so people know about it. And I think that's one of the common things. It's like, how do you get people to know not just what's coming up, but what's happening in our parks? And it's something that we strive to do, but not everybody reads the same things that we put out on the media. That said, the amount of work that was completed was tremendous in about 3 hours, which is, I think, probably unheard of. I've never had a report back from an event as successful as that. And then also, just as importantly, some new people that want to come back and be volunteers perhaps throughout the year, not just once a year. And we're always looking forward to the opportunity to expand our volunteer base, particularly in that location. And then coming up in March, we will be bringing forward a discussion about commercial activities in parks. Also picking up on our golf capital improvement projects. There's an increasing amount of focus and energy into making much needed infrastructure improvements at the golf course. And then in April, as I reported last month, we'll be bringing forward the 2-year financial plan. And that's it, unless you have any questions.
I don't have any questions. I see that we have the Chef Apprentice dinner coming up here in a couple of months. But I have no questions. Anybody? No? Great. All right, so that takes us, I think it's the last thing on the agenda, God, which is the turf renovation project, and I understand you would like to start off with an introduction?
Yeah, Chair McGill and Commissioners, I believe you've met our new Parks Manager, Simone Herrera, on more than one casual location, but this is his first opportunity to join the commission and presentation. And what he'll be talking about, as you can see, is turf renovation program and projects. Jasmine LeBlanc is also with him. But before he starts his presentation, I do want to share with you that this is an unprecedented opportunity that we're facing to have these kinds of funds to address our turf. We talk a lot about the fact that while our city's rich in parks, it's deficient in fields. And as a result, parks not intended to be fields are often used in ways that actually brings a lot of damage to that infrastructure. And it's a huge struggle for our park staff to maintain it. And it's old. And so what Simone will be presenting to you is the work effort of his division to move forward using ARPA funds. But hopefully, as we think about the next number of years in our capital plan, we'll also be presenting to you opportunities to reinvest, basic reinvestment in many of our open spaces for which we never have general operating funds to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and welcome, Mr. Herrera.
Thank you. All right. Okay, I'm Simon Herrera, Parks Manager, and I'm here with Jasmine LeBlanc, Parks and Recreation Assistant Director, to present the turf renovation program and projects that we started this year. We are excited that we will be renovating 11 sites that have not had this kind of renovation for many years. These are the 11 parks that will be renovated. The aerial shows the first phase of Alameda West and Alameda East, which I will cover in more detail later in the presentation. The reason we're able to do these projects is due to funding provided by the federal government through the American Rescue Plan Act. The act was a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus bill distributed throughout the country. The city of Santa Barbara received $22.15 million, and $750,000 was set aside for turf and irrigation renewals. $140,000 will be used for irrigation equipment, and the remaining $610,000 will be used for water and materials for the renovations. Labor will be done using existing staffing. We requested this funding because Santa Barbara has many very old parks that have not had renovations that we're aware of in decades. What you're looking at here is an image of Chase Palm Park. As you can see, it has a lot of bare areas, obvious compaction, uneven terrain, and unhealthy turf. This is further compounded by heavy usage. During the pandemic, Santa Barbara parks were used even more because they were seen as a safe place to get together for families and friends. We have not seen a decrease in use since the pandemic started. In addition, Santa Barbara has fewer athletic fields than similar-sized cities. This has led people to use parks designed for passive activities like picnicking, for active recreation like soccer, which you can see here in this image of Bonnet Park. These factors further contribute to poor turf conditions. This is why we're so excited to have started these projects. We started with Alameda East and Alameda West and Alice Keck parks last week. Alameda will be done in phases, and right now, about half of the park is being renovated. The other half will follow in a few weeks. We have no record of any renovations in these parks. We found that the park was in worse condition than anticipated, with heavier compaction than we expected. Once we began aerification, we started to hit unexpected old irrigation equipment, rocks, and other materials. Despite these unexpected hurdles, we still anticipate a great outcome. Despite the fact that we haven't done renovations in these parks, we do renovate all of our sports fields at least twice a year. Our staff is trained to do renovations, and we have all the equipment needed. Now I'd like to give you a brief overview of the steps we take to complete a renovation. Selecting the proper seed is one of the most important steps. For the Alameda and Aliskek, we selected a seed that is drought tolerant, salt tolerant, disease tolerant, and most importantly, shade tolerant, because of the many trees at our parks. Leveling is the next step. With leveling, we fill in low areas with a mixture of soil and sand to mimic the existing soil at each park. By leveling the surface, we provide a safer park for users. Bird cutting comes next. A bird cutter is an attachment that goes behind a tractor with hundreds of knives that cut through the turf, rhizomes, and stolons to break up the thatch. Following a bird cutting, we start the process of thatch removal, which involves low mowing and running sweepers to sweep up the loose materials. This then is followed by aerification. The aerification is done to aerify with hollow tines to pull plugs from the soil, to relieve compaction, and also to prepare the seed bed for the overseeding and to help with water percolation. At this point, we finally get to the overseeding, which is done with a piece of equipment like the one you see in the far right image. After this, we fertilize with low nitrogen fertilizer to protect the new seedling from burning, and top dress the soil to protect the seeds. Monitoring occurs during the growing period. We check soil moisture constantly to make sure the seed has adequate moisture to prevent both drying or drowning the seeds. We just talked about the importance of monitoring soil moisture. Now I'd like to talk about the importance of water monitoring in our parks in general. We think it is really important for people to have access to green space to play on, which is why we're putting time and money into turf areas in the parks. We also landscape areas not designed for play with low water use plants and limit irrigation of parks that do not get a lot of visitation. 80% of our parks that have green turf areas use recycled water. Finally, we use well-designed smart irrigation systems, which I will talk about in our next slide. As I mentioned earlier, we have about $140,000 set aside to replace irrigation equipment. This money is being spent to replace controllers. These new controllers are able to connect with cell phones without using telephone connections, which saves money. With the new system, we are able to turn on the irrigation from anywhere. In the past, the stations could only be turned on by the centralized computer in our maintenance, in our administration building, or with a transmitter that staff had to manually attach to a specific controller in the parks. These made inspections very time and staff intensive, as well as other adjustments. And now I'd like to show you a few renovations that were done last year. This slide and the next show you the renovation of Mackenzie Park that took place in December, as well as a photo of the park last week. And here's another angle. Here's an image of the White Murphy in November and another from last month. Here you can see Ambassador Park before its renovation last year, as well as what it looks like today. And finally, some photos of renovations at Cabrillo and the White Murphy. That is the end of my presentation. We're available for any questions you might have. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Simone. This is Jasmine LeBlanc. I just wanted to add one thing that wasn't included in the presentation, and that's the use of fencing that you might see. And I know that this has come up in some of the social media posts and things you've seen. We generally try to use fencing during the active renovations. So you may, if you've gone to Alameda Park in the last week, you've seen that the fencing is up. That's necessary because as you could imagine, the field is very vulnerable when it's got little sprouts on it. And this allows the grass to grow without having feet trampling over it. Generally, we'll take the fence down, which we'll do at Alameda once the renovation is completed. But we have had some questions about fencing that's currently up at the Cabrillo Ball Field. And that one is an area where we've actually chosen to keep fencing up during playtime because of how much usage that park gets. So we've looked at, as Simone mentioned, all of our athletic fields get renovations a couple times a year. And we evaluate how much playtime each park gets. That factors into the choices that he's making in seed selection, et cetera. That particular park already gets more than 100%, oftentimes 200% of play just from permitted field use. So it's basically hitting well beyond hundreds of hours of more playtime than is what's considered ideal for a field. So if we take the fence down and have permitted play as well as unpermitted play at that field, we're going to destroy it quickly because of how much playtime it gets. So this is one of our challenges that we face because we don't have an adequate number of athletic fields in town. We need to be able to come up with solutions sometimes, which means that not everyone gets the access they want at every hour of the day in order to be able to extend the use and provide as much use as we can. And to give a little bit of perspective, Cabrillo Ball Field gets about 14,000 people, adults and youth, coming in for permitted play on an annual basis. So it's pretty significant.
And Chair McGill and Commissioners, if I could just add, I think Jasmine mentioned this. What we struggle with is park users not being mindful of the fact that they're creating damage to a space that we're trying to renovate, as well as park users, when we're done and take the fences down, are there when we're trying to maintain it for a very specific use. And in the case of Cabrillo Ball Field, we actually, in our development plan, had proposed a home run fence that would help sort of delineate the space that was just for that. It's not something that we received approval for, so we may be looking at going back and getting something like that installed. We have other fields, for example, Dwight Murphy Field is fenced, and we try to balance the amount of space that's fenced with the amount of space that's open use. So in the case of Cabrillo Ball Park, when we did the renovation, we added fitness opportunities, walking opportunities, as well as turf areas for people to recreate that weren't part of a very specific organized use. And so with the idea that we're balancing and providing more opportunity for the community to use that park, and that has been sustained all these years. It's only been 4 or 5 years, but it's been sustained, almost loved too much at times. And so when we talk about our turf being loved too much, it really puts us in a big bind. We don't have the resources and the staffing, and you really do have to close it. So then it really puts everybody out and puts more pressure on other spaces. I would commend the park staff for trying to do their best under all circumstances. I think with this presentation, you can see that we're actually reaching into parks that never get turf support. And so that will provide a broad opportunity for the community to even enjoy our parks more and not necessarily need to go to Cabrillo all the time. Plus, we also have Chase One Park across the street, so there's other grassy areas for people to recreate casually as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for elaborating on that. I mean, I think we all saw the posts, or most of us probably saw the posts. And that's, I think, one of the ongoing challenges when there's such a diverse, I don't know, usage, desire for usage. It's balancing it, but also making sure you're doing the right things to be able to sustain as much of the properties as possible, and then reaching out to the community so to get that message out as much as possible. And I think that's maybe the trickiest part is getting the message out and outreach in a way that as many people as possible at least understand the rationale. Whether or not they agree with it, that you can't control. All right. Thank you again. Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions, and we are going to start in order with Commissioner Clark.
I have just a very brief question. Is there signage on the fences at Cabrillo Ball Fields explaining what we're doing there and why the fences are up? I think that might help a lot with the public concern.
Yeah, Chair McGill and Commissioner Clark, I do not believe we have signage there, so that's a great suggestion. We can work on something.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chang.
So a lot of these feel like one-time kind of capital outlays. I mean, should we expect degradation over time? You know, what is the rate of that degradation? Like, how long until we're back to where we were?
Is this on Alameda? Alameda West and Alameda East renovations that we started?
I guess just in general, more around, turf renovations and after the expiry of funds in December 2024, like, do we have the equipment necessary to maintain the turf, or, what is the pace, what just in general, what's the cost of that?
We will have water to water the place and to mow it, which is what we always had, but we won't have any more money to keep renovating it. I think it'll last, I would say, probably if it's probably 8 months to a year, depending on what date we do the last renovation. As the winter rains would help us extend that longer. So depending on when we do the last renovation will really dictate how long we can keep a good field. So between 6 to 10 months, I would say, roughly.
If I could add a little bit to that, I think what you're looking at, for instance, at Alameda, is a 100-year-old turf. And if you can imagine, it doesn't look that great, but it also isn't bare dirt. And so I think 8 to 10 months is how long it's going to sustain looking like a ball field. But if you're still looking at this 3 or 4 years out, it's still going to look pretty darn good. And a little bit of this is going to be us monitoring to see how long we can keep it sustained at a decent level. And it may be something, depending on the reaction we get in the community, that we aim to try to supplement and get additional funding in the future years to not let it degrade to the point that it did.
So Chair McGill and Commissioner Chang, I mentioned, although it may not have been apparent when I started my remarks, when we start talking about our capital infrastructure requests for the next 2 years and subsequent years, we are looking to find opportunities to build in more funding for these renovations in our capital, because it's just never going to happen in our operating budget. And the fact that we have the funds to initiate what we're doing today, plus the vision of Mr. Herrera and the staff to do it, and the desire to prioritize this, hopefully we can get to, our playgrounds are on a 12 to 15 year replacement cycle. Maybe we can get to a 3 to 5 year turf renovation cycle. Our tree trimming is on a 5 to 7+ year cycle. So we're really getting to the point where we have these cycles that we're trying to maintain and focusing our efforts in that way. Of course, that's all based on the city having the revenues to support it, but it's something that we want to look to prioritize.
Thank you. Commissioner Aldana.
Yes, I just have a question on Ledbetter. I was talking to a gentleman today. He was talking about the grass area where gopher holes this week, and they had a gathering. His brother-in-law sprained his ankle. So with that said, just curious to know when will that area get some attention?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Aldana, this project is also on the books. So we're hoping that hopefully by this fall, if not this fall, at the beginning of next year, we would be renovating that field as well.
Okay, and it's the grass area where the...
Yes, all the grass area will be eradicating all gophers out of there. We'll be trying to level. We're also trying to work with Waterfront to be part of the renovation, which they expressed interest in helping with that. So we will move forward with that.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Chang.
I guess I'm curious, have there been any conflicts with some of the people, I guess, living in the parks, or any anticipated conflicts as you renovate them?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Chang, we don't really have a lot of issues like that. People do want to see the parks improve, especially in places like, for example, the Alamedas. The reason why we did 50% of each park was to leave the other half open. And when we do the second phase, first phase will be open. So we try not to do all the parks at one time. So we really haven't had many issues with that.
Got it, thanks. And, sorry, did you
No,
have
go
a
ahead.
I guess my final question is, you're installing some of the quote-unquote smart irrigation equipment. The costs of that, does that go up or does that go down after the installation for overall maintenance?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Chang, these controllers have a 5-year warranty period. And the others we couldn't replace them anymore as they were obsolete. They wouldn't make them anymore. And in this case, they go for a long time. We're looking at 15 years to 20 years. These controllers will last 15 to 20 years. So they will be here for quite some time.
Great, thank you.
All right. Pretty much all the questions I had written down have been asked or proactively addressed. And I guess the only thing that kind of makes, it's great to see this happening. It's like Commissioner Chang, we'd be, how to sustain a one-off, of course, is going to be the big challenge for your department. And obviously, I can see just in the conversation, you have been and will approach the actual formal fields differently than the passive grasslands that get played on a lot. And there's kind of a sustain has probably, from what I'm hearing, a different definition for the things that are supposed to be passive versus the actual formal fields, which all makes sense. My pipe dream is that somewhere down the road, the money materializes for those small parks that, by dint of them just not being used as much, just don't have the funds to address in the way that you would like to. And the Hilda Ray McIntyre that came forward in the last few days comes to mind. At some point, I would love to see a way forward to toss a little fairy dust all their way as well. I know how difficult that is.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, that'll give you an opportunity to share as we go through the budget review process.
Yes. With that, I think, I'm not seeing anything else coming up. Thank you very much for a great presentation and a good discussion with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Wow. So we have no old business. As far as I'm aware, we have no new business. So with that,
Touch on something, maybe you would possibly put it on.
it depends on what it is.
Okay, as an example, regarding the street trees. The Street Tree Advisory Committee meets on the first Thursday.
Yes,
So like this month, they met on the second.
yes.
we find out, or we found out on the 17th.
Yeah, I mean, I know.
I know we've touched on this
Yes.
before.
So
but-
Director Zachary, I know you've addressed this specifically before to this commission. Would you care to do it
Chair
again?
McGill and Commissioners, it's not something for discussion on this agenda. However, you can sign up for the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting agendas and receive notice of those. If more than 3 commissioners plan to attend the meeting, 4, we'd have to notice it. That's why we have a liaison. But we would not provide, we can't make public the recommendations of the Street Tree Advisory Committee until your agenda is posted legally.
So I could be an alternate? By being an alternate?
Or you can just attend.
Got it.
Yeah, as long as there's not 3 of us. you
Got
can
it.
Chair
attend.
McGill and Commissioners, as alternates, you do not participate in the discussion or any of the assessment when you're at a Street Tree Advisory or any other committee meeting. It's there just to be a listener.
As a liaison, I just listen, so I'm not
Yeah.
participating at all.
And the things I liaise with, well, which is really IPM, yes, it's a observation.
Get it. Thank you.
Okay? No other new business. I will adjourn and see you on March 22nd.